Hey everyone, welcome to the Essential Creative Fireside Chat. I'm here with Jeff Harmon. Jeff, would you like to introduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah, first, Shell, thanks for having me today. I've been excited about our time. Um, so I am, I do many things, but my main call in life right now is to be the leadership coach and advisor for executives in the life science and the technology space. So it's taken me about a decade to get to that level of focus. Um, but that's what I'm up to on a day-to-day basis is creating content, serving my clients, sometimes paid, sometimes not, um, and just trying to do that in as authentic and as genuine way as I can.
That's wonderful. I actually met you when you first started out. I was looking back and we first connected back in, I believe, 2010 or 2011. I forgot to look at the exact date, but it was when you had just started. And I was trying to think, I don't know if we met through the Go Giver Success Alliance or through Greenleaf, maybe Center for Servant Leadership. But somehow, if one of those, we connected through a servant leadership platform. I know that, or through that space. And I remember I had a phone call with you. You had said like, hey, can we connect? And I'd love to hear about you. And I thought that was interesting because you're the first person who ever just wanted to know about me. And it was something that triggered when you did the interview with Adam. And you mentioned about how when you first started out, you learned about people so it could become a sale. And now you've learned how to truly like authentically connect with them. But yet I never knew that it was about a sale when we first connected. And so over the years, I followed you on LinkedIn. We've had a few email exchanges. But in that phone call, when you were learning about me, you had made a comment. My business name at the time had been Eyes Straight Ahead Creative Services. And in our conversation, you were like, so you're like a driving school? And I was like, oh no. And it was so funny because that is actually why I go by Vera fully now, instead of trying to have a business name, is because so many people were like Eyes Straight Ahead. They thought it was like a driving school or some kind of like focus presentation when I was helping people to create their businesses, do support services and marketing when I first began. And then over time, I also had done ghostwriting, and over time I've morphed that into the voice discovery coaching. So I don't know that you knew that you're responsible for that, but you are. So Jeff Harmon, everybody, this is why it's the Essential Creative on the creative side, the blog, and why it's Vera now for the business side.
Nice.
Now, your business is Brilliance Within Coaching or consulting?
Well, formerly in New Jersey, I'm Brilliance Within Coaching.
Okay.
Over the years, I added and consulting to that because what we do a lot more than just the coaching work, but always we're a coach, always I'm a coach. So I made my transition into this world. Actually, LinkedIn tells me I started my business on LinkedIn 13 years ago. So January 2007. I didn't move into my business full time until 2011. So I started my journey as a coach, not really clear exactly what that was going to mean. The joke at the time was, I'll coach anybody, as long as they have a pulse, and sometimes that's not even required. And so I fell in love with coaching. It was a great path. It was just a very easy on-ramp into this world of development, to get trained as a coach. And so I was a coach. And that really was in the very early days back in 2007, 8, 9, when it was primarily a hobby. That's really all I did. And then when I transitioned in 2011 into my business full time, had a period of discernment. I was really blessed with a year of severance when I got laid off, and I had a year of discernment, and that's when the leadership practice, my introduction to the commercial element of servant leadership, not just the faith oriented element, but the commercial business aspect of servant leadership came into view. And so I just say all that from your question about the name of my business, that And I say this to everyone. I say, listen, at the heart of who I am and what we do as a business is coaching.
Mhm.
That is who we are. That's how we're going to show up first and foremost. And everything then, the consulting, the training, and the other services that we provide just flow out of that.
I think that's a great model for business that a lot of people get stuck within. They feel like, well, if I'm going to be this one thing, I have to be only this one thing. And that works for some. I know that there's like, books about it. I've tried to read them. I've tried to implement them. I'm a many things girl. I can't focus on just one thing. And I have all these talents that I brought with me. And so in my business, when I was trying to do just the one thing, I would find myself often bored or like I wasn't helping the client as much as I could. And so now I love that our conversations start from a place of discovery and coaching in this voice discovery space, how to use your voice. But then, hey, if you need marketing, if you need this, if you need that, let's jump those others based on what I hear that you need versus just, sorry, Jeff, I'm just this. So I love that you're doing that as well. That's really exciting when I meet other people who aren't afraid to say, I'm mainly a coach. That's how I'm going to show up, but I'm not afraid to venture into these other spaces as well based upon my talents and your needs.
Mhm.
Let's talk about, so I've been digesting, I've watched it several times, the Adam Quinley, I believe his last name is, and your
Quiney.
interview, Quiney, okay.
Yeah.
I loved the conversation you guys had about leadership and the series that you're doing on what leaders don't talk about. I love doing that within the Christian space, is talking about the things people don't talk about. And in that conversation, it really stood out how much your transformation has come in the faith space, as well as coaching. And so talk a little bit, when I first encountered you, I don't know if you're a Christian or not. Like it never just came up because you weren't very bold about it. And I've noticed over the last year or so, you're much bolder, like sharing Bible studies. You shared a really great one about the fishermen recently, and Jesus with the boat and Peter, etc. And so I love things like that. And when we bring scripture alive into real life, and I've loved watching your faith grow in that area. How has that been for you? Like, was it a purposeful decision? Was it kind of always there, but just got bolder? Or have I just been asleep at the wheel and not noticed?
No, your observation is very astute. So I've been a Christian all my life. Um, it's it's really a journey of the last decade. Um, uh, I I just did a talk for a group combo virtual live in November, and I called it the decade of discipleship. And that's really what this last decade has been. That I can recall in 2011, 2012, in those early days when I had started my business. I was full time in my business, and really being gripped by fear, and just so blessed to have. I know obviously I know the people that that were in my life, that are still in my life, especially one particular person. And I remember the book that God used at the suggestion of somebody else that really just began began the decade. I said recently that it's only now that I realized that being laid off when the company I was with restructured and said, okay, everybody that a director and above doesn't have a job, you can reapply, blah, blah, blah. And I decided not to do that. Little did I realize that that had nothing to do with my vocation. I mean, God's purposes and his intentions are so multifaceted we can't even begin to imagine. So I'm sure it probably did relate to my vocation, but for me as the center point, it had nothing to do with my vocation and everything to do with my relationship with him. And so what started, and what you're now seeing the evidence of, what started 10 years ago and has developed over the years, is just this transformation of how I saw my faith, um, how I saw it, how I understood it, how I experienced it, how I experienced God, how I hear him, how he reveals himself to me. Um, that I mean, it literally is a decade-long process that I've been in, and um, and then I would say the last 2 years have been kind of the deeper dive that he's taken me in. The first 8 years, sort of laying the groundwork, and then these last 2 years, he's just, it's been an invitation to go deep, which I have willingly jumped down the rabbit hole, so to speak, to do that. And so what you're seeing now is the evidence of, or the outward evidence of that. And so the conscious decision I made, probably in the summertime, was to start doing those Wednesday posts on social media, specifically on LinkedIn. Um, and as folks can find me there and they can see what those are, as you've seen them, Shell, they are not me standing on the pulpit preaching. They're really just talking about my journey. And I think, so there's this coming to the surface of it. You called it boldness. I don't, maybe there's boldness, but it's just like, this is just, I can't do anything but do this. And the other thing is kind of a marketing thing, and that is not marketing trying to get sales, but I've evolved in how I viewed LinkedIn, in that what I produce, with the content I create, my philosophy in it is, I want people to have an experience of me, that when they go to check me out, or go to my profile, or check out my content, that they're going to get a full experience of who I am as a whole person. And so part of the decision in conjunction with, just, I'll use the being more forward and bold, and in that element of the content, was, yeah, I'm not hanging the flag that I work only with Christians, and that my work is Christian or biblical oriented. But if you're going to work with me, or you just want to know who I am, this is who I am.
Two things there that came up while you were talking. We think of boldness as being like, almost like, oh, Jesus freak, it's got to be in your face, it's got to be on the pulpit, it's got to include a soapbox. And I think of boldness, I guess maybe from being a youth leader for so long, I think of boldness as, we're bold when we share our business. We're bold when we're able to talk about what we do. We're bold when we're able to say, this is something different about me or important about me, and I want you to understand that. And so when I say bold, I don't mean it in a, like, because by no means is it that you go to your LinkedIn profile and it's like, oh my gosh, I can't work with them if I don't believe the same thing. Not at all. That's actually what I love about it is, so anybody who's been to our site a lot, I do a Sunday sermon series I had done in the past, where it was like Stephen Furtick, Michael Todd, individuals who maybe you don't believe, maybe you don't have a faith yet, maybe you're seeking, maybe you're a devout Muslim or Hindu or whatever, who doesn't believe the same thing I believe. But this message you can still take elements out of. I'm not a fan of taking the Christ out of things, but you can listen to those messages and still walk away inspired. And the reason I chose to do it that way is, I don't want to just work with Christians. I want to work with anybody who is assigned for me to work with, but I want you to know what my faith is. I want you to understand, if we work together, I am going to be like, wow, God bless this project. I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm sorry, the universe sent it that way. If you believe it that way, that's fine. But I want to be sure that I'm also living truly for who I am, just as I encourage you to do that. So I think that's what really piqued my interest in it and caught my attention, is suddenly I was seeing this other aspect of you. And I love also what you said about, it is this whole person element. I think sometimes when you're used to corporate, you're so used to this compartmentalization of, this is Jeff the worker and this is Jeff the business, the home, the father, the friend, the Christian, whatever. And when we own our own businesses, you are buying me. Yes, you're buying the service, but you're also buying the full person. So when I work with Brilliance Within, I'm not just buying that coaching moment. I'm also buying your experiences, your worldview, who you are. And that's a piece of this bigger picture that's going to help me be better. Just as somebody buying my services doing the same thing. And that I think has become also, you know how you say it's been like a decade with your faith. That for me has been the big thing, is understand, like I was always so shy to talk about business. I had so many friends who were like, what are you, like a trust fund kid? They didn't know what I did since I left working pharma, you know, but it's because I always was afraid to quote unquote sell my services. You also did a great, you and Adam had a great conversation around that too. I'm going to plug that, and if I can figure out how to share the link on YouTube, I'll make sure I link over to it, but you guys should watch that for sure. But that you guys talked about, like, you know, when you're just truly sharing what you do and you don't have that tie of like, well, Jeff, was this a wasted conversation because we're not buying each other's services? And instead it's just like, wow, this is Jeff. For years, I actually wrote a book. I have to go back and see if you were in it. If we did, in the drafting process, we had included Brilliance within as a resource. And I saw that when I was looking up to see how long we had known one another. But it's like, you never knew all that. You know, you probably had no idea over there what kind of influence you'd had, but you had that influence because it never did feel like, oh, he only cared that I become a customer. So I think that's so important, you know, for anyone watching. It is the full you know. Yes, there are some things when I buy like a written piece of content or graphic design, I'm only buying that moment. But for the most part, the people that I truly want to stay connected to, I'm buying all of them so that I know what I'm getting into. You know, I'm supporting another mother, I'm supporting a father, etc.
Yeah, I was just, well, if it's okay, I just like to poke at
Absolutely.
that because, but even that piece, unless it truly is just point and click and you're buying something, but even the design, you know, the logo or the graphic or the piece of copy, at the heart of it is relationship.
Mm,
Because I do that, you know, um, I work with freelancers who do that work. And so while at the end there is a physical product, I would just I would I would just emphasize that it's all relationships. It's all relationships. I just did a new conversation yesterday on in the next episode in conversations that leaders aren't having, and Kevin, he mentioned uh, Bob Berg's statement where he said, all things being equal, people do business who they know, like, and trust. And that's all about relationships. And so even that piece of content, somebody is writing it. There, as you just said, there is that person is a mom or a dad or a grandma or you know, one of my graphic artists lives in the Philippines, and they have had major floods over the past few months, and you know, she's a human. We've never met. We've only interacted on Upwork and on Slack, but she's a human.
mhm.
It's all about relationships. So yeah, it that really sparked for me as you said that.
I think that's a good clarification too. And I think from where I was coming from is, if it's a short term, like one, so like you said, point and click, I know I'm buying from a human, but sometimes, like, if it's a single mom who's out partying every night and her values don't align with mine, but she writes really great content and I can point click and get that ebook, let's say, then that I don't worry as much about. But somebody who is in, so like my graphic designer who does all of my, anything you see from me comes from Pixie Stock. Um, for like business related, she designs them, I'm able to use them, I love it, it saves me hours of work. I'm not a design person. Now her, I've gotten to know, I've paid attention to her work because it's a long term, I'm a lifetime membership with them, like it is long term. So I thank you for clarifying that, because it is, every interaction we have is a human. I think for me, when I work with people, I really like to make sure we're aligned, even if we're not both Christian. I don't like to support individuals who maybe aren't living a life of the same values I support. So if I have a choice in where my money goes, I like to make sure it's going into like good seeds, so to say, right? Sowing into good soil, as we love to say in the church. Whereas like a point and click, you know, I'll read a book from an author that maybe I don't agree with the whole thing, but it looks like a good book, you know, hey, okay, $5, $12, whatever. On that note, though, I think there is such a difference in this world, because in corporate, it is like point click, like I'm going to get my office supplies from Staples because they're cheaper than the competition. End of story. Doesn't matter who my sales guy is, how much I like him, whether he has kids, doesn't. It almost, you know, I was talking with from the nonprofit I work with, one of our members today, and we started our conversation with like a half hour, just how was Christmas? What's changed in your life? How has COVID changed this year? And we were talking about how you don't usually see that in business. Whereas in this kind of business, like the more solopreneur side, although I hate that term, I just loathe it. But like for those of us in business by ourselves without a whole employee team, sometimes it is more heart-centered. Often it is. You know, every single person I know, whether they are strictly corporate work or whether they're more of the faith-based work, whatever, there's a relationship that goes into that consultation process. In the beginning, we're talking to understand. I have a 90% decline rate as far as people who reach out and want to work with me. If we don't click and it doesn't look like we're going to align, let me send you to somebody else. You know what, Jeff? Hey, it was really nice talking with you. I think this project is great. However, I work with authors along this road. Let me put you over to somebody else. It's not that you're bad. It's not that I didn't like you as a person. It's just, I get that feeling over lots of years where I'm not afraid to have my income be less so that I can work with people I really, truly value. And in corporate, we're almost taught that different. It's all about the bottom line. It's all about get the work done, don't take too much time, which is why I love this so much more. Even the nonprofit I work with, I like enjoy that they've let me bring some heart stuff. When I first started there, they were like, take the heart out of it, Shell. I was like, we've got it back in there now. So talk to me, you mentioned life sciences, life sciences and another segment that you work with
Technology,
mostly?
life science and tech.
Technology. Talk about
Yeah.
what is it that you do? So if somebody's watching this and they want to learn more about like coaching and consulting with you, what is the kind of work you do with folks?
So our best work is really with the CEO in their early days or early years. It's not really even the early days because they're not ready. They're just drinking through the fire hose in the early days. But really in those early years, I would say less than 5 years, you know, the 2 to 3 year spot. So we especially work well with CEOs at that point who are putting their stamp on the culture of the organization. They've been hired to do something important. A few things, you know, turn their business around. The business has been performing below expectations for a time. And so the CEO has been brought in to turn the business around, maybe to navigate a merger or acquisition so that they could double or triple their market size. Could be leading them, growing them so that they can go to a buyout. I work with a lot of CEOs who are working for private equity held companies. So those private equity held companies have hired that CEO to grow the business so that then they can ultimately sell it and make a profit on their investment, or it could be at some point an IPO. So the CEOs are tasked with a pretty significant challenge to do something with the business. And so one of the main things we do is work with them to put their stamp on the culture, and that really is oriented all around leadership, how they personally do leadership. So sometimes we're just coaching the individual CEOs, sometimes we're working with their executive leadership team, sometimes we're invited all the way deep into the organization to help transform how leadership is done so that the culture that they want to create, that the culture happens. Culture is set by leadership. It's set at the top. It's not it can benefit from grassroots and ground level initiatives, but culture happens at the top. And that's why we come at culture through the lens of how are you leading? So that's that. And life science, it's a God thing. I mean, I didn't come in to this space thinking, oh, I'm going to work with life science and technology. I'm here in northern New Jersey. There's a lot of life science that happens in northern New Jersey and in eastern PA. A lot of friends in that space, pharma and biotech, and so just naturally fell. That's who my network was. That's where I got some opportunities to do some work early on, and really saw an opportunity to serve in that space. So that's the nature of the work.
Okay. I love that over the years you've been able to niche it down. Now, if somebody's not in those two areas and they come across you, can they still work with you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the fundamentals of what we're talking about are the same across industries. There are certainly some particular things with tech and life science, because a lot of the mid to mid upper level leaders came up through a technical track, and that's who we really specialize in working with, is helping in those organizations where a lot of the mid to mid upper level leaders have come through a technical track. But if that's not the case, the fundamentals and the principles that we bring and the support that we offer, it transcends industry or business vertical.
Okay. So something, I'm going to kind of switch gears for a moment, something that as we've been talking, I read a blog post of yours recently where you shared, I think it was from a couple years ago. It was like your 1 year celebration of, or 1 year reflection on living in a wheelchair. Can we
Mhm.
talk about that for a moment?
Sure.
Okay. So one of the things, it just crossed my mind, we're coming out of this COVID year, this pandemic, everybody's life has changed. We've all seen the different, articles and encouragement, et cetera, around that. But you have real life experience around when a setback has occurred. How do
Mhm.
you move forward? And it's just like, as I'm sitting here looking at you and I see the weight machine in the back, I was thinking a friend of mine was recently in an accident and his life is about to change very deeply. And you're living proof that, you kept going. I actually found myself before I read that, I didn't know had I met you and you were already in a wheelchair or had, like, was it new? And until I read that post. So,
Mhm.
how did you keep going after you were in the wheelchair? Like when this transition came from being a walking individual to being in a wheelchair, how did you, like, did you have a moment? I guess the questions would be around, or, if you feel comfortable talking, like, how did it stop you? And in any way, like, did you have a moment where it kind of held you back? Or were you able to just keep going and you found that, with your faith, et cetera? Like,
Mhm.
if you're just comfortable talking about how that happened.
Yeah, so it's a progressive thing. So I was diagnosed with the disease that I have, the neurological condition, in 2006. So, and at that stage, it was just very mildly symptomatic, and then so that was 2006. In 2000, and I started at one point in that time, probably in 2012, 11, 12, early 13, started using a cane, but life didn't really change a whole lot. I was still traveling a lot. Nothing really got in the way. Then in 2013, July of 2013, because my gait had become a little wonky, I stepped, rolled my ankle, and broke my tibia and fibula in my left leg. And
Oh,
that kind of hit the fast forward button. The bone fully healed, everything healed, but that kind of hit the fast forward button on the disease called AMN that I have. So that was pretty transformational. I can remember sitting in my chair in probably late 2013, wondering, would Brilliance Within continue? Would I be able to continue? And by God's grace, it did. There was clients stayed. I remembered clients would come to the house for work, local clients, and it was, and then my leg recovered, was using a cane, and at a certain point decided, okay, this is not very safe. My walking was becoming even more difficult, and so some point in 2016, I decided to I made the decision, okay, I'm going to move into a wheelchair. And that was the anniversary, was January of, I think I got it delivered from the house, January 3rd or 4th of 2017. And literally that next day I got the chair. I was on an airplane to Indianapolis to do some work with a client. So there was never it was just keep going. It was never a question. There was that moment or moments when I was recovering from my broken leg in 2013 where I wondered, wow, will I have to go get a job? Will my business continue? And I've actually had that thought, completely unrelated to my leg or the condition I have. I've had that thought a number of times in the third or fourth quarter of years. Will I be in business 6 months from now? Next spring. But to answer your question, there is no like inspirational moment, rise from the ashes. It's just keep going. I just kept going, and opportunities continued to come my way. Pre-COVID, 2017, 18, 19, I would probably say I was doing about 20 to 25% travel. I went in 2018, I was on 4 continents in my wheelchair. I was in Singapore, Germany, Africa, and I can't remember what the fourth one was, but so nothing. It was never really. It was. I know. I don't think of it as a rise from the ashes. Overcoming. I know it is overcoming adversity, but I've never really considered it in that way. It's just keep going.
Mm.
Just keep going, and that's yeah. So that's what that has looked like.
I love that, because we do often hear these rise from the ashes stories that make it seem like everything needs to be a rock bottom moment. I remember talking to a pastor of mine in the past. We were about the same age, and she had said to me, she had grown up in a Christian home, was always Christian. Her sisters were always Christian. There was never any walk away from the Lord, any of that stuff. And she said she remembered like sitting around with her sisters one day being like, do we have to go out and become bad kids so that we have a testimony? Because you always hear, within the church, it's like, well, I was drug addicted and then God came and he healed me, or I was this, or, I'm that person that Jesus needed to get me. And she said, we never hear the stories of people where this is just life. This is what it is. And so I love personally to hear stories where it is just, this is what it is. We just keep moving, whether it's in a good way or in a way where there's kind of like a tragedy or a setback or whatever. So I thank you for sharing that, because I like I said, I had to look back because I was like, it just never was a point. And so I've liked seeing also that you've talked about that more, because I think it is important for people to realize that disabilities today aren't what they were 30 years ago, or even maybe 10 and 15 years ago. We can do so much. Yeah, there's so many, not only protections within the corporate world, but when we're in these businesses for ourselves, people are understanding that pretty much nobody has a perfect life and a perfect way of doing things. So we're more forgiving of each other and more understanding of differences. And I've loved seeing that within business. And something you said about, you've wondered like third or fourth quarter. I think every business owner goes through that. I think if you're not in a W-2 kind of position where you're getting a salary, we all have those moments where, like I've told clients before, like, don't, like every now and then I quit like 4 times a week some weeks, depending on how intense the project is. And you have like some weeks where you're like, man, I could make more at McDonald's, especially here in Connecticut where we have like a $15 minimum wage or something. It's like, oh, I could make more serving fries and I wouldn't be stressed, but I wouldn't love it. And, and then you have other weeks you're like, man, I love this. Like God, there's some weeks you're praising God and just like, man, that was a great project. And other weeks where you're like, remind me why I took this again, but that's part of business. And it's the same thing people go through in their W-2 positions. There's some days you love work and other days you're like, okay, I'm going home and looking at the job boards tonight. So I love that you brought that up. It is something that transcends whatever industry, whatever kind of role you're doing. Jeff, you're a family man. I believe you have a daughter, right? Around the same age as mine, 12?
2 daughters, 13 and almost 9.
Okay. And how's that being a father of girls? Is there like, do you find that a little more challenging than maybe boys would be, or?
Well, I can't say I don't have any experience being a father of boys, so I
Gotcha.
can't say only that I'm a boy myself and grew up with a brother. But yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I can't. I never. I think I said to them recently. I I uh, I never thought about. I mean, I had imagination. I had a thought or some thoughts when I was young about being a dad, but didn't really have any conception of what it actually was or what it would be like. So it's yeah, I love my girls. Um, I call them Bud. You
Mhm.
know, they're hey Bud. You know, they're both Bud. Um, so yeah, it's a lot of fun, and time is marching way too fast.
Yes.
But such is life. You know, that's what that's the way it goes.
That, it's interesting you talk about like having like this kind of preconceived notion of what it would be like. My daughter and I just, because COVID kept us inside and not out doing as many activities, we had been spending some time watching some Netflix series, and we watched Gilmore Girls. And so being
Mm.
that I had been a teen mom with my oldest daughter, and then my youngest I had when I was 30. So there's quite an age gap, and she's pretty much always been an only child. And as she was watching it, she would ask questions like, why aren't you like that with me? Are other moms like that with their kid? And I was like, it's very different, because the mother that my oldest daughter had was more like that Rory Gilmore kind of like happy-go-lucky, let's be best friends kind of girl, where the 30-year-old mom had that knowledge. I
Mhm.
had the experience. I always joke I'm the oldest of three, and my younger brother, some of the stuff he got away with, it was like they were just tired by the time they had you. There was 6 years. I said, and so then there were the other areas where they were more wise. My parents towards them. So I love being able to see her morph and come into her own. But I also realized I had to throw out all of my preconceptions, because I did have ideas, and I
Mm.
had to throw them all out because each kid is so different. Like my two girls are so different from one another. And not just because my youngest is on the spectrum, but because, and that's our 15-minute notice. If anyone can hear that in the background, I apologize. So it's 2:45. But I noticed that I had to throw it out because the differences in them, if I tried to parent them the same way, would actually fail them.
Mm.
And so instead I've had to just, okay, here, you're in front of me, and just really me and God together. That's the one area I think in if I had to identify one that is the most I spend time in prayer with, it's the parenting part.
Mm.
So
Mm.
I've sometimes wondered if it would have been easier with boys, because they seem less, I also don't have experience raising a boy. But I've wondered if it's like a little easier because boys seem more self-sufficient, where girls need more guidance, I think. So, and that's not a weakness. It's just we are more inquisitive and more caring and open. And so it's been interesting doing that journey. So I know that we had to make sure that we're done by 3 so that we can respect time and so you can get on with your day. And so I appreciate you meeting with me, and wanted to make sure, I always forget at the end of these to say, how do we contact you, Jeff?
Mm.
So if you could tell us
Yeah.
website and best places to reach you.
Yeah, the best place, Shell, is LinkedIn. I do have a website, and it is a little dated, but I do have a website. The best place to find me for up-to-date content, I post multiple times a day, is LinkedIn. It's the best way for people to have an experience of who I am, even better than my website, I think, at this point. So um, you can find me, this face, my profile. Actually, my profile picture these days is one of me in my wheelchair. It's not it's not an up close headshot. So just find me, Jeff Harmon, on LinkedIn. I think my handle is Brilliant Coach. And just if somebody reaches out and connects after watching this episode of the Fireside Chat, just indicate as such so that I have some little context of how you've made your way to me.
Perfect. And that's Harmon, correct? When they look up.
Harmon, yes.
Perfect. So thank you so much for being here today. And again, thank you for helping me to change my business name, and just for the influence you've had, Jeff. We've talked in the last chat that I posted was with Bethany Perry, and we talked about your influence when you change the world can be on one person, and you never know how far that impact goes, or it could be because you have many that you're influencing. And your reach, even without you knowing, had gone so far with me, and then other people that I've talked to about, like, you should follow this guy, you should check him out, or sharing a post with someone, especially your Bible study ones. I love sharing those in the videos. And so thank you, and thank you, like, from one content individual, like, who loves reading content, to another who's producing it. I really thank you for always producing quality. I've never read anything from you where I'm like, okay, I just read that for the 600th time. Like, if I read it multiple times, it's because I'm reading you multiple times, not because I'm hearing a message that has been regurgitated from something else. And so I really appreciate that about you, and just how you show up fully as yourself. So everyone, Brilliance Within Coaching and Consulting, Jeff Harmon, find him on LinkedIn. And if you have any questions, reach out. I will make sure that I put it in the YouTube description as well as on the blog post. So thank you so much, Jeff.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.